Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing well and staying safe. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to another edition of our Fireside Chat, where we spend time with prominent entrepreneurs and leaders across the globe who are influencing our industry today. My name is Harmeet Singh, and I'm the CEO of RateGain. I'm very excited to be here, especially in light of the fact that my team sort of keeps me boxed in. I don't generally get to get out often, so I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to uh, the, the fireside chat. I'm honored to have our friend Paul Anthony join me for our chat as well. So before we get started, a little bit about Paul. Paul is a commercial excellence and global partnership sourcing director at Hotelbeds. After developing his professional career with Trinitor, a UK family-based business, it was purchased by First Choice. Paul was appointed as a regional manager UK and Spanish cities for Hotelbeds, a role he held till 2009. From 07 to 09, he was also responsible for the integration of various businesses as a result of the merger between the two. Since then, he's held various positions at Hotelbeds, such as Director of IT, Strategic Projects, before becoming Director of Destination Services, and then most recently as the Transformation and Integration Director. In addition, Paul is also the member of the board of directors at Hotelbeds. Lastly, Paul holds a master's degree in econ from Edinburgh University. So Paul, welcome, pleasure to have you join us again. I know we've been keeping you busy, so thank you for taking the time. Paul, clearly Hotelbeds is the world's leading bed bank. Please tell us a little bit about the Hotelbeds journey.
Firstly, thanks very much for that introduction. It sounded quite impressive when you read it out. I've never heard someone read it out with all of that, so thank you very much. As you said, it's the world's leading bed bank. We also have a sizable business in ancillaries as well, and for us, ancillaries is transfers, tours, and activities where we're replicating the success that we've had in selling hotel rooms to the travel ecosystem, doing exactly the same with the ancillary products. Hotelbeds has been around for 20 years. You mentioned that I was part of Trinitor. I was a product of an acquisition that was made in 2004. That company was our family company. So I've been with Hotelbeds for 16 years now. I think, as Hotelbeds, what do we do? We're really here to provide choice to the travel ecosystem, to those consumers, to suppliers, as well as to customers. We're technology driven. We do a lot with you guys, both with the Disco platform as well as the RateGain platform. But we do have a large element of local teams as well on the ground, both for our customers as well as our suppliers, right the way around the world. And I would say that Hotelbeds was then in 2016 bought out of what was the merger of TUI and First Choice, which you alluded to earlier. I was the integration director for those two businesses. We were bought out in 2016 by private equity, so we're private equity owned. Over the 2 years after that, we acquired, well, probably in the bedbank space, and the bedbank space for us is the ones that are dedicated to B2B business. Our two closest competitors, GTA and Tarico. We had just completed our integration. We were looking forward to our first year of a post-integration business, which, as you know, is finding a nice place to be. And this little thing called COVID hit us in March, which put a bit of a spanner in the works. But apart from that, we're still here. We're still thriving, and we're here also to help our businesses and our partners recover as well as that recovery happens.
Yeah, you make it sound so easy. Integration, acquisitions, and we all know the audience that's gone through it, we've gone through it. It's never as easy as it looks, but congratulations on all the success that you guys have had so far. So sort of transitioning to, your journey, you've had a very impressive career. Can you continue to have one that spans over 25 years in the travel and hospitality industry? Tell us some of the key milestones in your journey and achievements that propelled your growth.
So, firstly, my hair wasn't as gray as this when I started the whole integration part. So yes, you're right. It leaves its scars, but it also gives you, I think, a lot of experiences, and alluding to some of the milestones that you relate to. I suppose the first one was selling our family company. being important enough that a large business wanted to take the good parts of what a small business had and try to integrate it into that business, I think was an amazing milestone. And then after that, I suppose it's then seeing that you became a small cog in a very big wheel. And over the course of time, being able to then show my ability to help that wheel turn much bigger, I think is another milestone, which is probably over the course of the last 15 years, at least in a professional mindset. I think other big milestones for me is connecting business to technology. I'm not a technology leader, but I am somebody that understands how technology can help business. And I really enjoyed my time when I was director of IT to try to bring the two parts together. And I think that also helps you in business nowadays, that any commercial leader needs to have that technology background, I believe. And I think that's really helped me a lot. And I suppose the last big milestone from a professional perspective really is the integrations that we've done. As you said, it's not an easy part to do, and I think I played the part quite well. Made quite a lot of friends. I'm sure I made some enemies as well across the journey. And these businesses were fierce competitors for 20 years. So bringing that together with different cultures wasn't an easy process. I'm not saying that it was perfect either, but I think when I look back, that's a pretty amazing milestone that we have. I suppose my most important milestone or achievement probably are the three kids that we've got and are growing up nicely here in Mallorca, but that's more from a personal perspective.
Yeah, no, I was reading about your family a little bit, and not only avid skiers, but your wife is an entrepreneur as well. So there's an
Yes.
entrepreneurial family.
Yes, so she after, I would say, doing probably the real full-time job that the household had, which was bringing up three kids, which you can imagine, and as you know, is not easy. She wanted to do something new, and so she set up an online second-hand clothing business for children, for high-end clothes. Very much around the sustainability parts, very much around all online. I came in literally one day, and she says, "What do you think of this?" And she shows me a finished website that she's done in her spare time. So yeah, pretty proud of her. So and that's going well as well.
Yeah, so look, given that entrepreneurship runs in the blood, I'm going to look out for the kids. You'll have to just make sure you update us on sort of their progression. But, look, you're an entrepreneur at heart as well. We've got a lot of listeners here that may be up and coming entrepreneurs in these difficult times when one really needs to have conviction around the thesis, right, of what one started and needing to stick through it. What advice or message sort of do you give to our audience?
So I think what I see right now, my time as a smaller company, people feel that if you go into a larger company, does that entrepreneurship leave? The first thing I would say is that it leaves if you allow it to. If you constantly try to challenge the status quo, if you're constantly looking at better ways of doing things, I think that you can always strive to be entrepreneurial in whatever organization that you're in. That doesn't mean that the platform allows you to do it easily, but don't lose your drive to make that happen, because I think you make the companies a better place. And in terms of the convictions that you're talking to, I would just encourage everyone to be true to those convictions, but listen to others. You may believe that you're on the right path based on a set of metrics or what you believe to be the right path for your business. But in these times also, you need to look at, are there ways that you need to be pivoting in different areas? So listen to what's happening around you, listen to what's happening in the markets. It may well be slightly away from where you want it to be, but I think right now for many people, it's also about survivability as well. And therefore this, I think in the travel ecosystem and the travel industry that we're all in, we know that the business will come back. We just don't know the when. And for those entrepreneurs out there, it's probably pretty tough for them at the moment. It's tough for everyone. But I think what's important is, stick out at it, survive where you feel that you can pivot and not go too far from what your journey is. But if you can make it work, I think are really important. And the other thing that I would say, which I learned when I was in the UK with the 7/7 bombings as well, some days you'll wake up and it looks very, very dark. And then you need to then feel, London sometimes is quite dark anyway, right? But I think you do need to then pick yourself up. Those dark days will be there, and pick yourself up when you can, and then go again. And you will see that that your team will respect that. They'll see that, and you can create a positive energy for it, despite the fact that I'm sure that many people are going through a very tough time at the moment. So I think those really would be my key messages. Challenge the status quo. There will be tough days. Look to pivot where you feel that you can. And then one last point as well. KPIs that maybe you thought were the right KPIs to look at in a fast-growing business, maybe their year-on-year targets or maybe their operational targets that you're looking at, maybe no longer apply to look at those anymore right now. So really try to understand what's happening in your business right now and make sure you're able to measure it properly, because you'll find some interesting things when you look at it in that way.
Yeah. What I find perhaps the most challenging part when we're from an entrepreneur standpoint is knowing when to pivot. So you're right. You got to have the growth mindset, right? You got to be nimble, flexible. You have to be open to outsiders conversation and got to be open-minded. That's really, really important, with a conviction, of course, because you can't vacillate if you're open-minded all the time. But knowing when to pivot and then sticking to that execution and giving it enough time is what I find delineates success from non-success. Because I've seen entrepreneurs change their minds a lot. And I've then seen entrepreneurs that kind of go, you know what, I've done enough homework, I've done enough digging, where I actually believe there's something, and I'm just going to stick to it. Now, you have to be balanced, but that balance, Paul, is hard. That's a very hard, it's almost a knack, right? Of like, yeah, now I'm going to pivot because I've learned enough. And that no one can teach that, no textbook, no one can teach that. It's just a gut grit and really absorbing a lot of information. So I can resonate with what you said. It makes a ton of sense. Just going back to your first exit, with the thesis that you exited, do you feel that sort of come about? Clearly you're still here and you're doing very, very well. But when you exited with a mindset of 1 + 1, at RateGain, we say 1 + 1 = 111. We're so past the 3. It's unbelievable, right? The yardstick of ROI is really high. So do you feel, going back, that you a lot of it came to fruition as you thought about it?
I mean, we were a successful but a small business, and we wanted to. What I was seeing is that, at least in the Bedbank world, you need to have the economies of scale to be successful. I think there are many businesses that can grow in the Bedbank world and can do quite nicely, but does that then turn them into a multi-billion euro business? No, not really. And I think that that's what I wanted to be part of. And for me, I think I definitely achieved it. And also the other parts that I enjoyed as well is that when I joined the business, and some will still say it's still quite a Spanish business, but it was very Spanish. It was a very Spanish business, and we have successfully managed to internationalize the business in a way I think that is not easy to do, and you'll know yourself. And I think that being a key part of that internationalization was something that I enjoyed being part of, and I do enjoy being part of. So I think those, if I look at why did we sell, apart from the money, which was something that I'm still trying to get some of that off my parents, but that's for a different discussion over a beer sometime. The reasons to sell, the ability to be an important cog in a bigger machine, definitely I've realized that. So that's definitely happened.
Excellent. So turning to our current landscape, you can't have a conversation without talking about it, obviously. With the markets around the world opening up, what are some of the travel hospitality related insights that you can share with our audience? I'll pause here and let you answer that, and then we can sort of dig in.
So, listen, I think what are we seeing? We're seeing that whenever a source market opens, it's quite rapid, the growth that we see coming from that source market. So you could be and for us, what the source market is where does the travel actually start from? Where are they either flying from, or where do they live? So you see then that once those COVID type lockdowns have either been lifted or are being lifted, the pickup that you see is quite immediate. So you need to be prepared for that pickup because it is quite quick. And then you need to then say, well, but where is that pickup coming from? And what we're seeing right now is, which is probably fairly natural, is it's a pretty domestic business right now. It's domestic, and we're fortunate that we're around the world. So for us, there's not one domestic market. There's a numerous number of domestic markets. But it's the domestic markets that I think are having the quickest return to, and I won't say normality, but the quickest return to not be at minus 100% to being at growing at a quicker tick than other areas. And then I think you need to be very, and the question that to be asked by any company then is, are you set up to take a benefit from that domestic market? Because another thing is the domestic market is different to what maybe you used to before in terms of the international market. Very last minute. And when I say very last minute, same day business, which is something that for us, is new for us, at least to the rate that we're seeing, which then needs to mean, do you have the right operational setup? Do you have the right tech setup? Because maybe your systems weren't able to handle that last minute business in the same way. So I think those are the areas that we're seeing happening at the beginning. And now as what we call these travel bubbles or air corridors or whatever we want to call them start opening up, then you see then that intra-regional travel starting to come. Slow, because I think that the airlines are taking their time, at least in Europe, to put planes in the air. I mean, I think it's only really 3-4 weeks ago when they started to put a meaningful amount of airplanes in the air. And that intra-regional then is starting to happen, but by no means I think it's going to be, at least for this year, as big as what people thought they were, what it was going to be. And then the last part that we see is that long-haul travel is then, well, non-existent right now. There is not that long-haul travel, and I think that will take some time to come back. And for us as a business, we prided ourselves on bringing high-value customers to our suppliers. And for us, high-value customers were the harder-to-reach type customers, the people walking to a travel agent in Australia to take their trip of a lifetime to Mexico or to South America, where they don't know necessarily the hotels, and we can help that. And so for us, that's really what we see that our business is there for, and also to help the tour operators. And that's a slow burn right now. That is not something that's going to be coming back anytime soon. So then we look very much about how can we participate in a more meaningful way in that domestic business and that intra regional business. I think the other part as well that we also then see is when, and I don't know if you see it in the US so much because things are different in the US, and maybe we shouldn't have a political discussion, but what we're seeing, at least in Europe, and I think also in Asia, is when these coronavirus regions that are starting to spike again are happening, the lockdown happening there is fairly immediate, and the business disappears fairly quickly there as well. So we need to be mindful of that, because then there's a whole host of other things that need to happen there. Not only is the new business not happening, but the customers that were going to go to Beijing, or the customers that were going to go to Barcelona, suddenly, well, they don't really want to go when the place is going back into lockdown. So how do we handle that? How do we then have to then be mindful that we will lose business from it, but we need to be mindful, and we need to help to cancel those bookings where we need to. So yeah, it's a changing picture, and we would love it to all be more stable, but the reality is that that element of stability, I think that we're all craving for, I think we're still some time off that. I think it will take some time for that to happen. But I also see it brings the best out of people in the company. I've never seen in our company so much togetherness to make things happen and make it happen quickly. I think I'm proud to see members of our teams that are there to help our consumers and our suppliers. And some of them have given up their weekends. They've been working an exhausting number of hours because they see that it's there and it's worth it for us to do that. And I think that seeing, different teams from different departments coming together to get things done, I think it's a lovely thing to see, to be honest. I wish it would happen all the time, but we see it happening right now, and it's a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, crisis either bounds us or breaks us. And we are fortunate, you and I are, to be part of companies where this crisis has actually brought the teams together. I feel the same way for our side. Our team, and I don't think for any business today, Paul, uh, that folks are taking things for granted, right? I think everyone's sort of above and beyond, stretching. We're working harder than we ever have, but then you kind of go, you're moving the least you ever moved, and it's really interesting dynamics. And I would just say thank you for saying that about your team. I would actually echo that because I feel the same exact way. So you said it perfectly. Just on the U.S. side, look, there is a lot of noise in the US. So it's what's published versus what's actually happening. So I think when I view the country in general, there's this acceptance that, okay, cases are going to go up. We're going to get more and more. Yeah, we'll sort of circumvent it by wearing a mask, we think. But at the end of the day, there's just this high level of acceptance to go, it's here, we're going to live with it, and it is what it is at some level. Probably not the best way of sort of accepting, but that's where we are. And then there's the other side. With that acceptance, I live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of business hotels here, which definitely are challenged, but there's also a lot of luxury destination properties here. They're actually full. Folks are coming out. They're traveling locally. There's the staycations. As long stays up. So we extended stay. So we feel the way I look at when I look at the data, I kind of go, yeah, there's news. It's not great, but it's not preventing local travel. It's not preventing local vacations. So it's a dichotomy. It's really interesting. Where do you see traffic picking up? You had mentioned sort of broad strokes depending on the region, but is there a few particular sort of regions that come to mind that are green shoots that you think about and are focused on?
I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised with the US actually. Having said what you have said, we look at the
Yeah.
US market, and the US market is performing pretty well for us. And again, it's when I say pretty well, we've changed the way we've worked to then say, well, a lot of it's coming last minute. A lot of it is 1 and 2 nighters. So let's get the business that's out there, rather than hoping for business that we would like to have that right now is not there. So I think the US is one. China is another one, and new customers, new types of customers working with us for domestic business that they didn't do before. So that's another one that we've seen coming up. And then in Europe, Germany is an interesting one for us because it's a nice, much healthier domestic business than some other markets, but also they're now starting to travel to the rest of Europe. So that's something that we're starting to see coming through from Germany. And then the last one is the UK, and the UK is an interesting one. We're not seeing a lot of pickup for domestic business at this stage. Domestic travel, I think, has only very recently opened up in the UK. I think a lot of people go to Scotland, and that there's issues about they're doing things differently up there from a corona perspective. But in the UK, what we're seeing in the UK is some good last minute business coming to some of the Mediterranean business. Not as maybe strong as what people thought. But again, when you think about the airlift that's being put out there, I think we're seeing some good traction there. And interesting enough, from those two markets, we had seen some very good traction for very long lead time business. I think a lot of people or consumers felt that this year was a lost cause, and therefore they wanted to reprotect their holidays for next year. So we saw quite a lot of reprotection happening there. I would say those are the biggest markets. We did see Australia starting to come back for us, but I think with Melbourne happening, then I think it slowed down. And again, that's where I think it's interesting as well. When Beijing had its spike, then we saw a slowdown, but the slowdown that we saw in Beijing was China didn't go to zero, whereas you would have thought maybe people would felt that it would spike and other destinations would be hit. So it didn't happen for us. We had a slowdown, but it was still quite a healthy business that we saw there. But when you then look at Australia, I think it was a very different thing that we saw there. So that's where what we're trying to do is trying to understand the different destinations, the different spikes. What does that look like to then say, well, when the spike comes in one type of destination, this is what we should expect to happen, but not necessarily will it happen in all the destinations in the same way. So I think that's where we're trying to also be on top of, to understand those and try to model that in the best way possible.
Yeah, it is to your point, very difficult to forecast and predict. We are all looking out in our crystal balls and seeing what the year looks like. And I think, you can sort of throw darts at the board and probably end up in a more accurate situation than forecasting it scientifically. It's become really an art at this point, looking out. Speaking of sort of looking out, when you think of pricing in this environment, especially the strategic side, given that the whole objective at the moment is sort of heads on beds, I call it butts in seats, so to speak, and there's less sensitivity to pricing. How are you positioning for that in terms of strategy, pricing strategy? How are you all thinking about where you reside in this? So would love to hear some thoughts around that.
So listen, I think, when we look at it, at least from a customer side, I think that you're right. So the ADR of hotels that we're seeing is definitely taking a hit, as I think hotels are looking to say, well, what demand is out there? Let's see how we can bring those bums on seats or bums on beds, as it were, to the hotels. So that ADR that is taking a hit is, I think, it's inevitable. I just think that the industry needs to be careful about how low they go, because you start taking reductions of 40-50% in ADR, and I think it's very difficult to then make sure are you then hitting and covering the costs that you have, and also quite quickly you're almost educating your consumer that there is those types of deals out there. And I think that's a difficult one for hotels to decide what to do there. But I think we need to be careful to not go so low. And then then how does that impact us as an intermediary? Well, we take a cut of whatever that ADR is. So if that ADR is reducing, then where before we were making €5, maybe we're now only making 3 for doing the same thing. And I think that is the other bit that we then mindful of, to then say, is it worth chasing with very low margin, or should we stick to our guns? And we're constantly reviewing that to then make sure that we are pricing in the right way for the corridor types of business that we're seeing. Domestic business needs to be more keenly priced. Intra-regional business, I think you can price slightly differently. And I think that's important to do. We are seeing some of our friends out there pricing very, very low, and I would question as a business person, you are going to have additional costs. Whether those additional costs that you have are costs of unfortunately your customers maybe not surviving, or other costs that we have as a business to be able to run in this current COVID environment. I think anyone should be very, very careful about thinking that margin can be sacrificed just for the business that is being able to produce. I think there's definitely a balance there that needs to be looked at, but I would strongly encourage people to be very, very careful that they should be still making a healthy margin. Running just to bring TTV in, I'm not sure is the right approach in this current environment. And I'm sure many people will be tempted to do it.
Do you feel on the pricing from a hotel strategy standpoint, how is that impacting you? I guess let's start with that, because if the goal is we're going to sacrifice ADR, which it will be over the next 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, as we get to a vaccine and as we get folks confident back into traveling mode and business comes back, how do you see yourself dealing with hotels in pricing in general? Is there clearly there's a bulk purchase on your end, discounted price, but if hotels are driving prices down, how does that work from a business model standpoint?
So, I mean, the hotels are driving price down. I think, that gets to a point whereby, we take what we believe to be a fair cut for the work that we do. And if we need to do more work for that, then we will ask for that for that to be compensated correctly. But at the same time, we're mindful that the moment that you drive down the ADR that you're receiving, the cost of distribution also then becomes a more important factor of that. So I think, we just we're not looking to be greedy. At the same time, I think every business that we have are doing a job to be able to bring this business back. So we're not looking to be greedy. Neither at the same time are we saying that what we believe to be a fair compensation for what we're doing. We're largely sticking to our guns. But there are opportunities out there, and we're speaking to our suppliers to then see, what's the best way that we can make this a win-win relationship as well during these current times. So I think we're fairly comfortable with that. I think our suppliers are fairly comfortable in the way that we're treating them as well. I'm sure there'll be some grumblings in some areas, but I think we're fairly comfortable. And we're not trying to do things that some of our competitors are doing to then say, give me this and I'll give you something in return. That we're seeing happening, and I know that it creates good PR, but is it really what hotels need right now? And I think what they need to then see is their value for money in the distribution partners that they have, and providing those distribution partners are bringing through the trade that they can in this context. I think that those are the partners that will be there for the long term for them.
Yeah. When we think of pricing, sort of rate integrity is part and parcel to the conversation. We all know rate integrity has become more and more complex. And with the online platforms, we know it's transparent, it's visible, and frankly, it's real time. Given the price compressions, do you think rate integrity will be an issue in the near term or midterm for that matter?
I think I'm pretty sure many suppliers are turning a blind eye to rate integrity right now. They're looking at, well, who can drive me business or not. Yeah. But there are many other suppliers that still feel that that's the most important thing that they really feel that needs to happen, so that there's not an opportunity for people to take advantage of this current scenario. And I think for us, again, being an intermediary, we work with our suppliers and say, well, what is it that you want, and let's work in the most appropriate way. So I think that rate integrity is here to stay. Whether there's a few suppliers that may turn a blind eye to it in the short term, I don't think that will last forever. And I think the other one that makes it more complex in this current environment, there's many intermediaries that are trying to survive, and therefore they're looking at any way that they can plug in to be able to bring business to them. And that actually, if anything, makes that rate integrity discussion a more interesting one. I mean, we are seeing, as you know, that we've been one of the one of the leading players in the rate integrity discussion, let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
And we are seeing some of our customers that they're going into new distribution channels that maybe they didn't understand how it works before. And that's creating, in some occasions, some rate integrity issues. So by working with our suppliers and customers, that they understand what's happening, why it's happening, where it is a big issue for our suppliers, we're locking it down immediately. But I think that some will turn a blind eye, but honestly, I think that our suppliers have worked very hard to get to rate integrity, and they don't want to be in a position where all of that just goes out the window very quickly. So I think it is something that will be here to stay, at least in the long term.
When you think about shift from a supplier standpoint, I reckon as much as we want to get heads in beds, if you will, rate integrity is going to be continued part because it's still important, right? I mean, once you let that go, it's very hard to get it back and define your baseline again at some level, whatever the baseline is. Do you feel there's going to be movement from the supply side to the demand side, that the demand that still focuses on integrity and has that contractual agreement and honors it? I mean, because I think if I was on the supply side, it would be A, a concern, B, I want to gravitate towards demand that's sort of respecting that, and I may not be able to catch up. There's that parity side of it, if you will. But do you see shifts from supply to demand that sort of focus on it, even in this environment? Because I'm sure demand is going to take advantage of it, right? I'm sure there's going to be OTAs, other channels that definitely take advantage of where we are. It's just going to happen. It's natural. How do you think the supply will respond is the question, I think.
I think that the suppliers will grow maturity on this once they see that their base business is starting to come back. I think that the contractual relationships that they had and what they fought so hard and what they're fighting so hard every day to get to some element of parity, they will still want that to stand. And I think they'll want it to stand as well, because I personally, whilst I think we're in a slightly healthier place being a B2B player from a leisure perspective, I think business travel will take a lot longer to come back. And in some places, it might not come back at all in the way that we had it before. And due to that, then whatever business travel is out there, they'll also be looking for a deal, and they'll be looking for the right deal. So I think that suppliers will, in the short term, look at those heads on beds. But and when I say the short term, I think the next 3, 4, 5 months. I think the global chains have set out a strategy there, and they're not looking to change that, by the way. So I don't think that any global chain will then say let's drop our rate integrity. They also want to make sure that their direct business coming to from consumers is maintained. So I think that will still happen. But I do think that there will be other suppliers that over the course of the next 6 months, they'll mature there, and they'll want that to be maintained. And I suppose for them, it's for suppliers to make sure that they have the distribution partners that are striving to make that happen on a constant basis, because there will be that drive from some to then say let's work in a slightly different way, and it's up to the suppliers to decide who are there to that they can trust around that distribution, and they'll need to decide that. And listen, it's complex as well, because especially as an intermediary business, you think that a customer is working in a certain way, and then because they're looking for ways to survive and thrive, they'll start working in a different way, and that very quickly in this day and age becomes very visible. I think that's probably one of the benefits, that becomes very visible. And we've seen some suppliers saying, we don't understand how this can happen. And it's like, the whole travel ecosystem is based on what we all think that each one is doing. And if somebody starts to work in a new distribution channel today for tomorrow, they might not even realize that could cause an issue right the way through the value chain. So I think it's just incumbent on us to then see, as we see that happening, and where it becomes a real issue for our suppliers, that we act accordingly, and that's what we at Hotelbeds are doing.
Yeah, Let's turn to technology. You know, you had started off saying we're a tech company, and in this environment, Paul, we all know that automation is perhaps the number one thing we all think about in terms of efficiency, optimization. It's an opportunity to enhance, improve our tech stack. Volume is low. You guys have done a lot of acquisitions. They've been very successful. You're a successful company. It's now time to pause and make sure what was not getting done because volumes were high, business was moving at a fast pace, and now you can sort of go ahead and catch up to it, if you will, the growth of the business. And I think any business that's grown over the last, several years is taking advantage of that. So can you give us some examples of sort of what's going on at Hotelbeds, and how are you viewing your tech to enable you to come out of this stronger?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, you're absolutely right about, when you're in growth mode or integration mode, you often say, well, we'll get to that later, right? So we'll get to that. And I think before I go into what the automation are, what the tech team have done, and I think they've done an amazing job, is that they have they've looked very much about the inefficiencies that we had in our tech stack. And it's amazing once you start looking under the hood what you find. I think a lot of us, have moved to the cloud, and the cloud is great until you try to reduce your costs in the cloud. And anyone tries to do that, and they'll see that it becomes a bit of a challenge. And the benefit of the cloud is that you can just, you need more, and it just is provided instantly. So do you really look at, is it as efficient as possible? So the first thing that these guys did is they said, our applications that we have, where can we gain efficiency to drive down that cost? And they've done that amazingly. I look at it. I was in a session with them last week, and our cost per room night that we have now is the same as the cost per room night that we had pre-COVID. Now, for when you think about, you build a system to be able to handle 10, 15, 20 times the amount of traffic, and then suddenly that's not there. Scaling up maybe is easy, scaling down is not so easy. And the guys have managed to do that to such a point whereby when we scale back up, our cost per room night will now reduce as well. So I think that is a huge piece of work that the team did. And I think they've really set ourselves up for what the future will bring. And then on the other side, around the automation tasks as well, we've I think due to COVID, we've said, well, how can we make our customers more able to self-serve themselves? And I think it's fair that we focus a little bit more on the customer side than the supply side, to be able to self-serve, know what's happening, where is the travel corridor that could be applicable, an FM policy, make sure that they're aware and they're able to self-serve themselves. We've also put in chatbots for our customers as well, because in this scenario where you are inundated with phone contacts from your customers and suppliers, you're never going to be able to handle all of that in a meaningful manner. So we've invested in there as well, and I think that's really that's been really successful, and people have our customers have congratulated us for that. We've moved to a cloud telephony solution. So we didn't have a cloud telephony solution. We no longer have our physical telephone systems for our contact centers. It's all in the cloud, which funnily enough has allowed us to, all of our contact center colleagues can now work from home, and they're as productive, if not more than they were before. So I think that's another big benefit that we saw coming in. And then I think on the supply side, one thing that we are looking at, and how do we work in a different way, is with companies like yourselves and your platforms. How do we work in a way that makes our ability to drive volume and also drive bookings to our suppliers even more seamless than it is today? How do we make it simpler? How do we make sure that we've got the promotions that we need out there? Rather than having teams that have to do that manually, how do we take advantage of some of those technical capabilities that we have? And that's another area of focus that we're working on now as well. So there's many more things that people would like. I'm sure that when I talk to our sales team and I talk to our supplier-facing team, they would love to have a lot more than we have. But I think, the guys they've focused on the most important things. We're using robots quite a lot now. It's something that we've put into place a lot more than we did before, and we're seeing the benefits of that. And I think, as the business comes back, again, the cost to serve for us to serve our business will be lower than when we went into COVID. And I think that's a good thing. That efficiency we're able to then drive to our customers as well as to our suppliers.
Yeah, I know we're working together on a couple of tech initiatives that the team is really excited about that really play on the theme of what you just indicated. So, uh, given time, so we've got about 13 minutes, and I want to be mindful. I actually want to talk about tech a little bit more, but let's move on, and maybe if we have time, we'll come back to it. There's a couple other questions we have as well. So just on health and safety, I mean, we can't talk about today's environment without talking about the protocols sort of being published around the world for gold standards on health and hygiene, right? Like Accor's come up with its own all safe cleanliness, booking.com's come up with its recovery tool package, Make My Trips come out with its own. So how is Hotelbeds looking at this? What are you sort of rolling out if you haven't rolled it out? Give us some insights into that.
So we've rolled out our Safe to Stay program. What we decided to do is that we said, do we roll out something in addition to what different governments, different associations are doing, or do we then say we will accept what the chains are providing it feeds and it answers the questions that we want to be answered. We'll accept what associations are doing. Even sometimes country and governments are saying what to be deemed to be COVID safe. So we'll accept that and make sure that our customers are able to see that. And where there are hotels or destinations that don't have that, then we're acting as a consultant to then say, look, these are some of the protocols that we believe that you should be putting into place. Please put them into place to make sure that we can continue selling you. So those are the programs that we have decided to do. But I think, what was important is I don't think a supplier wants to then have another layer on top of a layer that they already have. If they already have the layer and the layer is already recognized as COVID safe, be it the safe program that the Portuguese government has rolled out, or what Accor is rolling out to all their franchise hotels, they don't already want to then start having to fill in different protocols or different documentation for every single intermediary. So we took that position to say, we'll accept, make sure we can get visibility of it. We'll accept it. If it's acceptable to us, we will carry on selling those products, because there are some of our customers that demand that now. They say, look, we want to make sure that we're sending our consumers to a COVID safe hotel, and therefore please help us to make sure we have that information. So that's the position that we took, and we took it quite early, and now it's being rolled out on a worldwide basis to all our customers and suppliers.
Yeah, and I'm gonna move on. Thank you for that. But given time, I'm gonna continue the conversation on corporate responsibility. Social responsibility, I would rank it as high as health and safety sort of initiatives that are coming out. There's more and more and more talk about being socially responsible as an organization, giving back, especially in this environment, in this pandemic, if you will. What are some of the social responsibility activities Hotelbeds is sort of in, and I know you've done a couple of press releases on it as well, but give it some insights into how you all are thinking about it.
So listen, I think, on this, what we believe, being a large company, we have a large footprint of teams, and we're giving them the ability to volunteer in programs that will help the elderly, and especially in a COVID scenario, and help the ones that are not so fortunate to ourselves. And I think that our teams really truly enjoyed the fact that we were doing that, and we are doing that, and we'll continue to do it. And those corporate volunteering programs, I think, are here to stay. I think that the company also has another element of being socially responsible, and that's to its own employees as well. And I think that, as anyone, we've had to look at our cost base, and sadly, we've had to let some of our Hotelbeds family leave. And we also want to be socially responsible to them. We also want to make sure that we're helping them. It's very tough calls that we need to be making. It's not of our making, but as a company, we need to make those calls. But how can we help them in that scenario as well? And we're trying to make sure that abrupt change in their lifestyle and career is as smooth as possible. So we're doing a number of things there. We've created an alumni network. We're helping various teams around the world that we've had to say goodbye as well. We're also doing a number of things around helping them with their curriculums and drop-in units to be able to do that as well. And I think that's where, most people, when they talk about social responsibility, it's to the outside world. I think also to what I call the Hotelbeds family is also important as well. And that's what we're trying to make sure we're doing as well. And that's a tough, but it's something that we've been doing as well.
I always tell my team it starts internal. As much as we want to help the world, it starts. I actually tell my kids the same thing. The kids, my kids.
When they're not looking at, is that when they're not looking at their videos and playing their video games?
They're not willing to listen around the house, but they're willing to listen to their friends, right? So it starts inside and then you go outside. And very glad to hear you are looking inside. These are tough times, Paul, right? We at RateGain have come across similar challenges. There's no company that hasn't come across it, large, small. And I think we are all being as human as possible, running our businesses, but also being very empathetic to everyone around us. And I think it's really important we continue to do that. And it's great to see. So before we move on to Q&A, I've got a couple of things, but we are, you've been awesome. We're sort of short on time, but on a personal note, how are you and your family holding up? I know we went right into business, but how are you doing and coping with the new realities?
Listen, I mean, I think, we live on a small island in Mallorca in the Mediterranean Sea. And I think we were quite lucky during COVID. We have a very good health system here. And when COVID really hits, it's geared to be able to handle the millions of tourists that we have. And therefore, I think the island did very, very well during the COVID environment. So, the lockdown was interesting. I think we actually got closer together as a family. As you can imagine, working in a large company that we are, I don't spend as much time as I want with the family. And then suddenly for 3 months, we're spending every day, and they actually really enjoyed it. So they and me really enjoyed it being so close. And so I think that was good. We're all healthy, which is good to see. And now we've been able to start enjoying what the Balearic Islands are able to offer. We made a choice not to travel for this summer, at least outside of Spain. And very often, what's close to your doorstep, you don't enjoy as much because it's so close. And now we're saying, well, let's enjoy it a lot more. So we've been to 2 of the islands that are around here. You see a very different atmosphere. The great thing about working from home is that you can do it from anywhere, anyway. So yeah, we're enjoying ourselves. So it's all good. It's all good there.
Yeah, vacation feels far, like it's an afterthought after. So my family and I, we travel twice a year, religiously twice a year. And this year, we haven't gone anywhere, and it feels like ages ago when we traveled last. And we make the best of it. We're very blessed, just like you. And we're very, very fortunate to basically be able to just do things around our house and around the neighborhood. So I can appreciate that. Stay sane. So just moving on to Q&A, we've got a few minutes left. So let's see if we can quickly go through these. A question on, will hotel beds and web beds get a larger share of the market post-COVID?
A larger share, I think, yes. Will the total share be as big as we want it to be? I think remains to be seen. A larger share, I think, yes. I think that unfortunately we will see some of our competitors fall by the wayside. But I think we'll also see then, others coming into the space as well. And we talk about web beds and hotel beds, but there's this small company called Expedia that is very relevant in this space as well. And I think they also have the ability to benefit from this as well. So yeah, I do think that the share overall will go up. It's just how big is the pie, I think, is the other bit that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, I share the same thing with my team. The pie will shrink. It's who's going to have the bigger bite at it. You know, it's a very thoughtful statement. So going on to our next question, what's your thoughts on UAE as a destination in general?
I think that's from Fly Dubai. I think
Yeah,
we work with you guys. So Rico, and thanks for the question. I
yeah,
think the UAE has had a tough time. I think it's only recently that you have opened up. I think your travel policy in the UAE is probably, or the health policy for travelers is probably one of the most advanced in the world that I've seen, designed to protect the residents and the travelers there. I think that it's the right call for a government to make. My concern would be for anyone traveling outside of the GCC is, will that stop people traveling there? Purely because I think if I'm correct in saying, if you do get COVID, you'll need to quarantine in the destination for 2 weeks. There's some question marks about who pays for that as well. And I think it's the right call to make from a government. Will that stop tourism coming to Dubai? I think is a question mark. On the flip side, I think you'll see a lot more people within the GCC and the UAE that maybe are not so concerned about that will travel within the region. So I think that will be a benefit that you have. Maybe a person that normally would not normally go to Sharjah suddenly says, well, let's go there because we prefer to stay close to where we live. So I think that's a benefit that you'll see.
yeah. The next question is, do you consider new activities products as a B2B intermediary where trust and security is important between suppliers and travel companies?
I think, look, trust is always going to be important. So in terms of what we talk about a new activity or new products, I think, health is going to be top of mind of everyone. And therefore, anything that can help the ability to make sure that whatever you're buying, you're somehow protected from either protected, or if you're not protected, at the very least, all the possible things that can be done have been done. I think I think anyone will be looking at those types of products. At the same time, I would say as a travel intermediary, we also want to enjoy ourselves. No, I mean, we also want to make sure that we have that element of freedom. So how many of us will want to go to a place whereby, I mean, it might be clean, it might be looking super safe, but can I actually enjoy myself? So I think that's the balance that we need to then make sure that we have as an industry, because otherwise we might actually stymie demand purely because that we make it so difficult to get to, or that you feel as if you're so sterile that you're actually frightened of it. And I think that's something that we need to be careful about.
I'll just sort of add to that. I think as an industry, it is an inflection point, and perhaps an inflection point till the vaccine comes out, right? I have seen videos, and so have you and others on this call, and where you see the journey of a traveler from A to B, whether from a plane to a hotel, and sort of how that all unfolds. It actually doesn't look that pleasant, right? And at some point, if it becomes too ornery, Paul, we're not going to get folks back, the ones that even want to come back, right? And maybe more receptive to coming back, even without a vaccine, understanding they can work through it. We have a herd immunity that's going to take place at some level, and folks are going to want to get out, right? So we got to make it where we create safety, but not at the expense of the experience. And that's a really hard balancing act.
That's for our suppliers, no? That's for the suppliers to think
exactly.
that. And I think it's a tough one. It's not an easy one to answer.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And so, but it impacts all of us as an industry. So from a bed bank perspective, who will be the victim of lower ADRs, Paul, in this marketplace?
Oh, who the beneficiary? I think will be the final consumer.
Who will be the victim?
He'll be the victim. I hate to say it, but I think it might be the hotels.
Yeah,
The hotels will, the lower ADR, I think, will be a struggle for them to push it back up. I think that as an intermediary, we can also look at pivoting to higher quality hotels that have a lower ADR. That means that ultimately we get the same number of euros per room night that we sell. But I think many hotels a lower ADR is going to impact them. So I think that's where that they'll be impacted by that. And they just, I think the entire industry needs to be careful about that.
yeah. So the last question we have is, do we think, or do you think the static rate sales will fall in relation to dynamic? So we're gonna have dynamic pricing, dynamic rates. What's your view?
No, I think there's a need for static rates for certain types of customers, and I think providing those static rates are well protected and are able to do a job, I think that if anything, they'll make a bit of a resurgence. We're starting. Let's look at China. China are looking, and Ctrip and others now start looking at what I call the Groupon of travel, the pre-sale voucher concept, and that is static rate, and that is there. And I think for a type of business, I think it's there, and there'll be many hotels that will want to take advantage of that, providing it's protected in the right way. I think it's here to stay because it can build a good base business, and then from that base business, you yield accordingly.
Where do you think dynamic pricing will come into play? I agree. It's not going to be across the board, right? But where do you think large cities?
Last minute. I think last minute dynamic pricing, and that's where it needs to be careful. And you can build a very healthy static pricing business, but then if your dynamic pricing is too dynamic and it starts bringing rates in too low, then in the end, the industry will just go more and more last minute, and therefore you're no longer yielding to increase your yield. You're kind of doing it in the other way. You're yielding to decrease your yield. And to be honest, we started seeing this happening already before. And I think it's a constant education also with suppliers. Your yielding should try to yield up, and I think there's a danger, especially now, that if anything, they'll be yielded further down, and that's one of the dangers that we have.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we're finished. Let's see. I think one more question popped up, if you're okay, Paul.
Yep.
Isn't credit from hotels to Bedbanks finished? Will everything be on VCC soon?
It depends on how much we want the business to flow and understanding the full financial flow that we have. I think it will definitely be more restricted. But at the same time, if you look at what a tour operator does, they're not asking the customer to pay for the entire package or the hotel room the moment that the booking is made. And therefore, if we make it too difficult to allow that financial flow to replicate how customers and consumers are ultimately buying the products, I think it will be a challenge. I think there'll be a temptation, definitely, to go more to VCC because it's also a more efficient model as well. But I think the credit terms that we have do serve a purpose to bring types of business to the table, and I think we have a danger of shutting that out if we try to bring everything to a model which is a prepay model.
Yeah, yeah. So I know we're up against time, Paul. Let's see. Are we good?
Yeah.
Oh, they're loving it. Is Hotelbeds looking at any additional acquisitions? I'm sure you can answer that very easily. It's a great time to buy.
Listen, if there's a cheap buy coming up, I'm sure we'll always look at it. But it's I think right now we've got our own issues, and COVID is all consuming for us. So how we navigate through that, so it's not something that we're actively pursuing right now.
Yeah, I think in this time and place, we look to re-engineer our business's position for what a post-COVID world looks like. And that in and of itself takes a tremendous amount of energy within the organization. So looking outside at this point as things evolve is very, very challenging. I think we're all opportunistic, but to your point, I think internally getting things right, because things, it's dynamic and the market's changing. So look, I do want to say, Paul, it's actually been a lot of fun It's been fantastic, and your insights, and thoughtful insights sort of are really appreciated. I've enjoyed it. I do want to thank our team as well for putting this together. And I want to thank my team for letting me out of my box so I can actually do something beyond just normal course of work. They don't allow me to speak often, but when they do, I enjoy it. So that's a hint for what it's worth. And I want to thank our audience as well for attending and the insightful questions and all. So, Paul, thank you very much. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Hami.
it.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.